when you start making a bit of money online, your first inclination is to spend a ton of that on pleasurable stuff like traveling, getting nice food, this kind of stuff, because you've got money now, right? And you probably didn't have it before. You can do things you've never been able to, etc. But you shouldn't be spending money purely on pleasure, and actually the majority shouldn't be spent on pleasure. And I'm going to get to why I say that. But first things first, I've been very into kind of philosophy and whole general life questions these past few weeks. And something very interesting is the fact that avoiding pain means more to you than having pleasure. Like if I told you for the next 5 minutes, you can endure the absolute worst pain on earth, and then for 5 minutes after that, you'll have the absolute best pleasure on earth. Now, obviously, I can't say which one you choose, but chances are you'll probably say, no, I wouldn't take that trade, because the 5 minutes of absolute pain is worse than the 5 minutes of absolute pleasure. So, therefore, we value the lack of pain more than we value the presence of pleasure. So, in terms of money, you can spend money in two kind of ways, right? And that's spending money for pleasure or spending money to avoid pain. So spending money for pleasure might be going out to eat at a nice restaurant or driving a really nice car, and people are looking at your car and you're driving really quickly and you've got a very nice house and that kind of stuff. That's pleasure. Driving pretty quickly could be avoiding pain, but okay. It depends on the way you see it. But then avoiding pain would be buying food to eat so that you're not hungry, right? So the kind of difference between those two are buying food so that you're not hungry, avoiding pain. Buying food at a nice restaurant is going above and beyond that pain to now have pleasure. Like let's say there's a baseline, and if you're hungry, you're below this baseline. If you're eating food, you're at this baseline. And if you're eating at a nice restaurant, you're above this baseline. Okay. So now we've established how the kind of system works. Now, my argument is that you should always work on getting everything to baseline first and consistently before going up into pleasure and going up and down and all this kind of stuff. So something you'll see a lot with people, especially in the online space, because I think people in the online space are notoriously bad with money. They'll spend a ton of money in the short term. Like they'll go travel for like a year, just blow all their money on like new phones, new MacBooks, all that kind of stuff. Now there is a time and a place to spend money, especially on travel and new technology and stuff to work better, make work more enjoyable, that kind of stuff. But I'm speaking more about unnecessary spending and like just overspending in general. The problem is doing that where you're taking it above baseline, like now you're in a very pleasurable state, means potentially in future you'll be back in the painful state. Because most people doing all this online business stuff or making tons of money when they're young, you probably don't have a family and kids, right? And one day when you have a family and kids, you're not going to want to struggle with like paying rent or putting food on the table. So you don't want to have that pain. You want to avoid that pain in future. But people sacrifice at least a part of that to have the pleasure in the short term. So that's where the trade-off comes in. Now, you have to have a good balance between spending some money for some enjoyment in the short term, because you're not going to live forever. But also you need to have a good balance of thinking about the future to avoid pain in future. So something Oscar, one of my business partners, told me recently, which I'm sure he got this from somewhere else, is you want to live partly like you're going to live for 60 more years, and then partly like you're going to live for 60 more days, right? And I generally agree with that, but I do also think I save pretty much all my money. So let's say I get my amount per month. Obviously, it varies a lot. If you want a stable income, you shouldn't be an online business. You shouldn't even be an entrepreneur. Go get a normal job, which there's nothing wrong with that. But if I get my 100%, let's say I'm paying 30% to tax, I get 70% left, I might spend, out of that 70% that's left, I might spend another 5%, probably less, but let's say 5%. And then the rest of that, I put in my investment account. Now I'm going to tell you what my strategy is short term, at least to get to the point long term. I'm investing all of my money right now into just like a very safe account that has 7.3% interest rate per annum, and inflation where I live is like 3.5%. So essentially you profit like 3.7, 3.8% per year, something around there. But anyways, the idea is I'm just going to keep adding money in there, keep adding money, keep adding money. And then in like 3, 4, 5 years time, I want to buy an apartment in cash, and I want to live off the interest after inflation on that account. That should be enough to cover my like living expenses. And then any money I make, I just keep pouring into that. So then my life is pretty much passively covered for, and I'm just going to add money to that, and it's going to keep growing, keep growing. Now, obviously, you do get tax on that, so there's a few kind of equations and stuff you should do before just committing to that. But the point is also, if I'm doing that, I can actually be at a point in future, in like 5, 10 years time, where I can spend a lot of time with my family, my kids, my wife, like we can travel, do all these things, because our living expenses are already covered for with the investment account, right? And then obviously, like, it depends how lavishly you want to live, that kind of stuff. But then you pretty much eliminate all the sense of pain, at least in a financial sense, of like, oh, being hungry or not having a place to sleep, that kind of stuff. That will all be eliminated by you prioritizing that in the long term. And then you can have all these pleasurable activities and stuff on top of that with any extra money you make, first of all. And number two, the other nice thing about this is the fact that you now get to spend these pleasurable activities and stuff with the people you spend the rest of your life with. I would much rather travel to, I don't know, let's say Spain. I don't know why I said Spain. Spain, Italy, Greece, whatever. I'd much rather travel there in 10 years' time with my wife than travel there alone right now, right? Again, there's a balance. Like, I'm probably going to go to Thailand middle of next year because I do think there's a bit of a balance, and it's not that expensive, especially Thailand. But I'm willing to sacrifice short-term pleasure for long-term gain. At least I'm willing to sacrifice short-term pleasure for the lack of long-term pain. That's essentially what it means. And a lot of people don't agree with that. They think like, oh, let's just spend money now, do this, do that. Which is why I'm making this video, because at least you don't have to agree with me either. You can have your own view on all of this, but I'm just telling you what my perspective is, right? And I'm looking to change my channel a bit so that it's more like just random talking videos about topics that I enjoy, rather than like, first of all, lifestyle content I dislike, but I won't get into all of that. So the point being, I think it's very good to think about the long-term pain that would be possible if you take the short-term pleasure that you can have now. Another thing is also to consider how you're investing in everything, which is also like what percentage returns you're getting, this and that, whatever. But the real point is just, you need to think about what is your ultimate goal in life and what does rich mean to you. So that's a very big part. You need to define rich before everything else. I'll probably make a separate video on this too. But if I gave you like 10 minutes now to think of a definition of what is rich, what would you come up with? Pause this video right now. Just think for a few minutes. What is your definition of being rich? And then come back to this, okay? Okay, now that you're back, my definition of rich is being able to spend uninhibited time with the people you love. So that means, I just realized I kept looking at that and not the camera itself. That means, oh, I wonder how that's going to look. Anyways, I'll keep going. We'll see after. If it's fine, I posted this video. So my definition of rich is being able to spend uninhibited time with the people you love. So what does that mean? That means uninhibited means you have to be physically healthy, capable, as well as the people you love. So that means you can't be like super overweight that you can't do certain things, or like you can't walk, or there's like a loved one has an operation that they can't afford, that kind of stuff. Like these things you can then pay for because it's uninhibited, right? So it can't be inhibited by any health factor, anything like that. Obviously things outside of your control means it's inhibited, but it's not inhibited within something that's in your control. right? So let's say someone gets their leg amputated and you get them a prosthetic leg. Like, there's not much more you can do other than that, realistically. But anyway, so uninhibited, you're not physically incapable of doing certain things. Also, you're not financially incapable. If you want to travel with your family or whoever the loved ones are, like, you're able to do that. Okay? So that's also a form of uninhibited. Also, you're not on a strict time schedule. So you're not working like set hours every single day. Like, you can't get time to spend with your family or your friends or whoever your loved ones are. So again, uninhibited in the form of time. You can do it whenever you want. So essentially you can do whatever you want because you're physically capable and you have the money, whenever you want because you have time freedom, with the people you love, so you're not alone either. So those are kind of the full parts that make riches, in my opinion. And money is a major part of that, don't get me wrong. Money is a very, very big part. But if you lose any of these, it takes away riches. Like, if you lose people you love, you don't have people you love in your life, it's just you alone. You lose riches, at least in my eyes. Same goes for if you lose the ability to spend time with the people you love. Like, if you're constantly working, you have people you love, you have money, and you're healthy, but you can't spend any time with them, again, you're not rich. Or if you're very overweight, you can't walk, then again, you're not rich. So it kind of all adds up to what I define, at least, as rich. And then that's what you're striving towards, right? And then the general idea of this video is to tell you that you should sacrifice a bit of the short-term pleasure, not all of it, like still go out for nice meals, maybe travel here and there because you might not live forever, to gain the lack of long-term pain so that you can be rich in future, according to my definition of rich. Another interesting thing to think about is, to me, saving pretty much all my money, most people would say like, which, by the way, random update, the business is not cooking this month, but anyways, saying like, oh, you're saving so much of your money, you might die tomorrow, and then what would you have wanted to do? You wanted to spend like all your money, this kind of stuff. Honestly, no, I don't really care that much about spending money. For me, I think most people fall somewhere on the scale of pain, avoidance of pain to pleasure. So let's just use this scale now, or let's go back to the old one. Some people fall like here. They value pleasure way more than lack of pain. Whereas I fall like right in the middle. I value lack of pain a lot more than I value any pleasure at all, if that makes sense. So I would much rather live now with the idea of lack of pain in future, which by itself makes me lack pain in the present moment, because I'm not thinking of how I might be in pain in future. And that's worth more to me than the pleasure, if that makes sense. I know this video is kind of all over the place. Tasting a new style, we'll see how it goes. But so to me, if I were to die a month from now, and I only was spending pretty much 5% of my income after taxes and everything, I would still be happy because I knew what the idea was in the long term. And that brings me more pleasure, or lack of pain, than the pleasure I would get from spending that money anyways. So that's my viewpoint on all this. If you have something else or a different viewpoint or any caveats to this, put them in the comments. Also, if you have a better definition of riches, put that in the comments as well. If you're looking to get into the whole online space, make money online, I suggest doing it through sales. If you want to learn more about that, DM me on Instagram. Link is in the description. And thanks for watching, boys.